Hi and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the Healers Muslims monthly podcast. Um, I'm very excited to let you all know that we have Pauline Brown with us. And today we'll be talking about navigating intimacy uh, and sex in marriage and in relationships. So I'd like to introduce my guest today. So Pauline Brown is a highly experienced sexual and relationship psychotherapist with over 30 years of practice. She's worked with various organizations, including the NHS and RS Relationship Scotland, supporting individuals and couples navigating complex relationship and psychosexual issues. Originally from London, she has lived in Glasgow for over 30 years and comes from a Caribbean heritage as a first generation Black British individual with parents from the Windrush generation. She has recently been appointed as NHS healthcare chaplain at Ayrshire and Crosshair Hospital, bringing her deep expertise and compassionate approach to supporting patients and staff. She's accredited by COSRAT, the professional body for psychosexual therapists, and UKCP. Her wealth of experience and dedication to her field make her an invaluable resource in the world of mental health and relationship therapy. Wow, Pauline, you bring a lot of expertise with you.
You make me sound amazing.
You
Thank
are
you.
amazing.
Thank you very much.
You are amazing, and the work that you do is absolutely amazing. Um, Highly trained. You need to be highly trained for the stuff that you do, and we're going to talk about that. Um, and with the wealth of experience that you have working with people from all different backgrounds, right? So you've had experience with Muslim couples, non-Muslims, various.
Yes.
So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for taking the time out. So we're going to go right into it because it's such an interesting topic which impacts essentially all of us, people who are married, who are not married. Um, so we're going to look at maybe three broad themes and then finish up with a quick fire round, if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, so my first question, and many people will perhaps ask this, like, why does intimacy decline in marriage? So as couples get married, essentially the first year or two, um, it's quite exciting, but over the years, it becomes challenging. So how does intimacy evolve over time, and why do couples often struggle to actually maintain that?
This happens for everybody, actually. There's a kind of time scale that we relationship psychotherapists know is between 18 months and 2 years, where the rose-tinted glasses are on and we're so in love and we can't keep our hands off each other and the energy is very high. The excitement of meeting and falling in love and getting to know each other is high. And then after that, we're a lot more settled, we're a bit more comfortable. We perhaps don't dress up for the other as much. We stop putting some of those small efforts in as
Hmm.
we become comfortable and familiar with each other. And often, once the family comes along, there's less time for each other, and the parental role takes over from the couple. Before the children come along, we can focus on the couple because that's all there is. But once the family comes along, the parental role has a much bigger place, especially with young children, and intimacy can fall off the agenda very easily.
Hmm.
Uh, and we stop putting those small efforts in. I remember during lockdown when people were suddenly thrown together working from home 24/7. Lots of young people in their late 20s, early 30s were ringing up and saying, my libido's gone, my libido's gone, my husband is upset or my partner's upset with me. And I would just say, just out of the blue, what are you wearing at the moment? And invariably they'd have tracky bottoms, an old tatty t-shirt and some unattractive slippers on. And I said, these are the small ways that we let the intimacy die, where we stop taking that wee bit of effort to look nice for each other. Get a bit spruced up and put some aftershave or put some perfume on or put a bit of makeup on and make that effort. And it's very easy for that effort to not be seen as important and to decline, especially in longer term marriages.
Hmm.
We almost feel we shouldn't need to have to do that. But actually, we do. We
Hmm.
we do need to, and the longer the marriage is, the more effort that needs to be put into it to maintain intimacy and maintain intimate connection. I like to talk about intimate connection because that takes many, many forms. That includes sexual activity, but is not totally sexual activity. It is about having intimate time together, time for the relationship, not just time for the parental role, time as a couple where you either go out on dates or spend time together, or even if you have a favorite TV program that you cuddle up on the sofa and watch together. The couple, the relationship needs its own air and space and energy. And that's often when things decline because people are not aware of that. They think that it started, they've fallen in love, they've had the family, and the relationship will just run itself, and it doesn't.
Hmm. So it's interesting how you break that down with the 18 to 2 year period, then the comfort period, and then when the kind of children come. Um, you also spoke about the idea that we have to use our imagination a little bit, actually, when it comes to intimacy. I just wanted to share like a personal anecdote. So funny. Like I was planning. I'm planning. So we've got small kids. So we have a small swing in the garden. So I wanted to change that to a normal swing for the kids. So I went on Amazon and I typed in adult swing. I didn't. The idea was like a swing for the adult, so I can and
Oh
and and and,
dear, oh dear, dangerous ground.
and you'd be shocked what came up.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't be shocked
So
at all because I would be weary of typing that into my Google search because I know what would come up.
I showed it to my wife. I was just laughing. I was like, "Hey, listen, like couples also do this." She's like, "Don't you dare go down that route." And that was just only a few days ago. And I thought, well, it's interesting because people are trying invariably new methods out to kind of keep the spark in the relationship.
They are, and it's very funny. I first saw the Adult Swing on an episode of Sex and the City, and Sex and the City was a really useful program for a lot of people as a reference point that was more open about adult sexuality and could almost normalize it in the fun way that that program did. You know, that we're talking about 20 something years ago, which was actually quite groundbreaking in terms
Hmm.
of some of the issues that it raised and what people do to keep the excitement. And there are a lot of sites, like I'm sure one of the ones you found yourself on inadvertently, but there are a lot of sites out there that have toys, aids. If we are of a mind, and if that is an interest of ours, there's a lot of ways that we can help keep things a bit more exciting by trying new things, new
Hmm.
variety. So yes, I'm sure once you got over your shock, you must have had a bit of a giggle.
I did, and it was interesting. And so, because you've worked for a while, a good couple of decades, do you see um, our kind of relation to kind of these different sexual activities differing over generations? I could be wrong. I would imagine my grandparents' generation, it was very different. There was no toys and none of this stuff. But now the clients are much younger. They're open to experiencing a bit more variety. Would that be correct?
I think so, but I don't necessarily raise these things until I get a feel for the client.
No.
And if somebody is particularly religious, whatever that religion might be,
Mm.
I might be hesitant in raising or stepping outside their boundaries. I don't want to be letting people feel that they're obligated to be trying these things and they
No.
have to be going down these paths because that's what's expected of younger people. People have to do what feels right for them.
And the feedback you get, do people use it? I mean, when they talk about their personal sex life, I mean, do they talk about
Yes, people are going online and buying toys and aids and things that will help create a bit of excitement as well. And these things are very discreet. They arrive in
Yeah, yeah,
plain boxes. The companies that provide these don't want to alienate their customers by it's a very discreet service. And if you've been together 30, 40 years, you might want a bit of help in
sure.
creating excitement. We also use a lot of books. There's a lot of really good books out there that people might want to read and help increase interest and libido. Libido is an energy. It's like any energy. If we don't look after it, it will dissipate and disappear. And
Mm.
actually, that's not just over longer term relationships. I meet people in their 20s where the energy is dissipated and disappeared because
Interesting.
it hasn't been given attention. The libido is a use it or lose it energy.
Mm. I was going to ask about mismatched kind of libidos. So maybe just one, two things around that. Like, how do you sustain that kind of energy, that positive libido energy that we're talking about? And then what would you recommend if there was a mismatch within couples?
I've never met a couple that matches totally.
Okay.
It's a fantasy. It's a myth. We're human beings. We're complex people. No couple has a completely matched libido. At the beginning, when the energy is high, as I said, between
Hmm.
18 months to 2 years, it can seem compatible. But usually it's after that period that we kind of take a measure of where people's true libidos lie. Because after that honeymoon period, we call it, and the excitement is all over, people's libidos will fall back to their natural levels.
Mm.
And that's when we get a sense of who has the highest libido within the relationship. And what happens if people have a much higher libido than their partners, they need to learn to bring it down some, whereas the partner with the much lower libido needs to learn to bring it up some, because it's the gap between the libidos that creates the problem.
Mm.
It's not the libidos, it's the
The
space
gap.
between it. Yeah. And if the space between it is too big, that puts pressure on the relationship. And if the space between it is too narrow, that puts pressure on the relationship. In that somebody is having more sex than they want, or somebody's not having enough sex or as much sex as they want. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it's the space that is the problem. And that's what we need to sort out. We need to sort out the space.
So you would work instead of you would look at that space and work. What does that mean, and how do we close that?
To narrow it as much as possible.
Yeah.
What's amenable to the relationship. Usually, when couples meet and they're falling in love and highly excited in the early days of marriage, sex usually happens between 2 to 3 times a week. We know that that was reasonably sustainable. Maybe if you've got children, it needs to drop to 2 to 1 times a week. That's a reasonable expectation,
Yeah.
especially if you've got very young children and there's a lot of sleep deprivation.
Mm.
We have to lower our expectations. We can't go back to
So,
the honeymoon period or the early days. So if sex was happening 3 times a week, then I think 1 to 2 times a week is a reasonable expectation when
mm.
circumstances have changed.
Just for our kind of viewers and listeners, just to remind them, libido refers to kind of the sexual drive and is
Yeah,
influenced by various factors like hormones, mental health, relationship dynamics. Um, Maybe just final quick, like I know there's not one number and people always look for numbers. So anyone who's married like between 10 to 20 years, is it once a week, once a fortnight, something which is quite healthy? And I know that you can't really reduce it to numbers because there's so many factors around this.
there are so many factors. But if
Yeah.
someone's been married 20 years and they're having sex once a week, I'd say that's a really great relationship.
Okay.
That's going really, really. And I met somebody recently who was a Muslim that enjoys a very healthy sex life with his wife still. Their children are teenagers now. And it was just lovely to hear what a warm, loving, and healthy relationship this young man, reasonably young man, late 40s, had with his wife, and that they're still really into each other and still
Hmm.
make that effort. And he was just looking for some just tips and hints to just smooth out a few rough areas that were beginning to cause him some psychological distress, you know. So that's really nice because that's somebody, from what I could gather, the couple have maintained their intimate connection. You know, they do date, they do spend time together, and now that the children are much older in their late teens now, they can make that time for themselves.
That's nice to know. I think sometimes couples, when we look at tabloid articles, and you always think, are we having enough sex? Or, we should be having more. But it's nice to know, something like once a week. It's quite, of course, there's a lot of context to that, but it's nice to know that. Thank you for that.
Yes, and I think even if it suits you as a couple, once a fortnight is fine.
It's fine,
You know, if that suits you and none of you are upset that there's not enough sex or not enough sexual contact, then that is fine. I think there's something about the regularity that's important. You know,
Yes, okay. Yeah.
I find event sex difficult. You know, like so if you only have sex when you're on holiday or
Yeah.
if you go away for the weekend, excuse me, and then nothing happens for the next 6 months, that's more problematic than once a
Mm.
fortnight.
So something which is regular, even if it's once a week, once a fortnight, once every 3 weeks, but something which is kind of regular, sustained.
Yes, has a routine and is a regular part of life
Mm.
rather than something that only happens when we're on holiday or we're more relaxed or when we've put normal life down. We need to find a way of making our sexual activity a part of our normal lives because it is and it should be.
Moving on to our kind of second theme, it's around the common psychosexual challenges in Muslim marriages. So in particular, we're looking at Muslim marriages, Pauline. I think two, three came up, and we've kind of discussed this before. So we would like to, so the kind of top three, and there's a lot, but what I kind of gathered, and then we'll kind of look at each. One was vaginismus and fear of intimacy, porn addiction and its impact on marriage, and infidelity and emotional cheating. And I know these are huge topics within themselves, and you can speak a lot about them, but just kind of gently touch how they kind of impact the relationship. So maybe the first one, vaginismus and fear of intimacy, and this is found a lot in kind of faith-based communities where there's some sort of sacredness around sexuality.
Yes, yes. If the message that you've been given for most of your adolescent and young adulthood is that your um, virginity is prized and sexual intercourse is a sacred act that should only happen between your husband and yourself after marriage, then that can often set up a mindset that will ensure that vaginismus becomes present within the mindset. And obviously, women won't know about this until they attempt penetration.
Mm,
Some women might recognize that they have difficulties earlier on, um, depending on circumstances. But often women won't know that this is present until they're married and they attempt penetrative sex and sexual intimacy at sexual intercourse. It's a very complex and difficult issue. It creates a lot of distress, a lot of
mm,
psychological distress, because it's something that the female body is designed for, something that, on the whole, most women can manage and achieve. So the women that can't manage and achieve that, it creates a lot of psychological distress and difficulties, and particularly in Muslim marriages where, within a certain time frame, people are looking for the children.
mm,
And obviously, vaginismus affects fertility.
mm. So just for our viewers, vaginismus is a condition where the tightening of the vagina muscles, where penetration is very, very difficult, very, very painful, and sometimes impossible. And it's a lot psychological, there's a lot,
It is purely
yeah,
psychological.
purely psychological.
There's very little physical
Mm,
that contributes to that. It is the mind literally has just shut. The fear of penetration and penetrative sex is so big that the mind literally shuts the muscles down. and makes penetration very painful and painful for the guy as well, and impossible.
Um, if there are couples who are listening to this, what would your advice be?
You would have to seek psychosexual therapy. It's very rare that anybody sorts vaginismus on their own. Occasionally, you hear of women that somehow manage to get it sorted without any psychological intervention. But then I see them because later on, something will happen that will bring it back.
That's
And
interesting.
that's what we call secondary vaginismus. And
Okay.
it means that the root cause wasn't really sorted in the first place. They just managed to achieve penetration. I met a Muslim mother, early 40s, with secondary vaginismus, grief and stress. I think a parent had died recently. Stress at work brought secondary vaginismus on. And when we discussed it, she remembered that penetrative sex had been very painful at the beginning of the marriage, but they had managed to overcome it themselves. But it came back later
Hmm.
on when there was a lot of stress in her life.
Hmm. Okay. So seek out, I think what you've said is seek out help,
Yeah.
professional help. And as a counselor, I know this is not for someone who's just a mainstream counselor, but particularly trained in psychosexual
Yeah.
psychotherapy. Yes.
Yes, because a primary vaginismus, which is what we call
Mhm.
that kind of main vaginismus, where penetration has never been achieved, um, because it's so deeply psychological, you have to get to know the client and pace. If we push too hard, we will let the fear overwhelm, and the client will back away. We just have to know just when to pace, push, and with the involvement of the husband as well. Husbands play a big part in helping to resolve these issues. And
Okay.
it is resolvable. Over the years, I think I've only met one person that wasn't able to overcome it
Mhm. Mm.
in 30 plus years. Most of the people that I've worked with vaginismus are parents now. Have
Mhm.
a Muslim couple I worked with for a long period. Is their second child is a year old now.
Okay.
And if people come as soon as they see it, rather than leave it
Mm.
until they want to start a family.
Mm.
As soon as you recognize that you've got vaginismus, that's when you go and sort it. Because when it's left to the late stage where you're keen to start a family and you've got this issue that we don't know how long it's going to take to resolve, primary vaginismus is routinely between 2 to 3 years work.
Okay. Wow. I mean, it shows you there's a lot of the psychological aspect does take time, and that's why you need to work kind of
Yeah,
through.
yes.
Um, my next one is porn addiction's impact on marriage. I mean, that's kind of general, but then in the Muslim community per se, where we have a kind of, there's a faith perspective against pornography, and that it's, for Muslims in particular, they would view it as something which is not healthy for them. It's wrong. The faith. And so when that kind of creeps into the marriage, often then there's a crisis, not just of the relationship, but of the faith. And what does that mean? So, how does that kind of impact the marriage?
That's if the marriage is aware. More often than not, the partner won't know that there's a porn addiction within the marriage. Somehow, the person that has the addiction, and it has been predominantly men. I've not met a Muslim woman with a porn addiction.
Okay.
The female partner often doesn't know,
Okay.
and somehow they've managed to keep it secret, especially with the availability of
Yeah.
smartphones. And you don't 25 years ago, you had to be using the family computer, and that's often how people got caught. Nowadays, you've got a phone in your pocket that can access the internet and access any site that you want. So it's a bigger secret. So um, the wife might be aware that her husband is no longer seeking sex with her because he's satisfying his sexual appetite with the pornography. So she might be aware that sex has lessened, I suppose it depends how she feels about that, but frequently it's a big secret, and it's usually when something difficult has happened, like they've stepped over a line that has made them fearful, i.e., they start using the porn addiction. It escalated to the point where they're taking risks with their work. They're using porn when they're at work, or
Mm,
and the boundaries have gone, or they've started seeing sex workers and they're anxious about pushing that line. That's often when people will arrive at my door, when something has happened that's frightened them.
mm. Um, in terms of, I mean, it'll be for our Muslim viewers, it'll be interesting to see how, I mean, and this is very kind of generalized, how would like non-Muslims, would they see pornography as an issue in the relationship, or as something that the partners will watch together? Like, just for a Muslim audience to understand, how do non-Muslim couples see pornography?
Much the same. Um, some couples may watch pornography together, but that's if the porn usage is what we would call a normal usage, as something to stimulate arousal and desire, not something that you're spending 5, 6, 7 hours a day on,
Sure.
because then you're in a problem. But the vast majority of couples see porn usage in the same way, as something that is detrimental and adds a difficulty to the marriage.
Mm,
It's not just Muslim couples. Other couples will come along once they become aware that there's a porn addiction going on.
mm.
Um, is
Um,
porn more prevalent? Is porn addiction more prevalent in the Muslim community? Um, I wouldn't necessarily say so.
okay. Mm. I mean,
I mean, it happens.
I've got a lot of, I mean, you're right. It's just a sexualized society, but I do have a lot of Muslim male clients coming in. Either they've been caught, or they're kind of working around it, or it's very unhealthy, and
It is highly prevalent. Is it more prevalent than the kind of white mainstream
yeah,
community?
mm.
Uh, Slightly higher.
And slightly higher in the Muslim community. Is that what you're saying?
I think so,
Okay,
yes.
that's an interesting observation. Mm.
Yes, I think it is slightly higher. And I don't know if that it's more forbidden because of the religious
I wonder.
restraint that makes it, people seek out the excitement of the forbiddenness, if that makes sense.
There is that, and then there's aspects of the faith that prescribes what's right and wrong when it comes to intimacy. So anything like anal sex, that's kind of forbidden. And then, men have a lot of fantasies around kind of group sex and orgies and, kind of all of that. So I wonder, in that relationships, on a conscious level, it can't play out. So in a very subconscious level, then it plays out in a different arena.
Absolutely,
Mm,
absolutely. And that's why I would say that it's kind of slightly higher, because
mm,
people might be seeking excitement at things that are technically forbidden
mm.
within the religious constraints.
My next, when it comes to the common issue, the last one is infidelity. Um, I wonder, I'm not, we know the kind of impact on the marriage itself, but if we trace ourselves a wee bit back, like, when infidelity happened, has a partner already checked out in the relationship, or either it's a power dynamic, like I mean, it could be a power dynamic where, she's in control, she's quite authoritative. You know what? I'm going to bring her down a notch. And the best way I'm going to do it is cheat, and that'll really hit her confidence. What are we looking at when it comes to infidelity? Like, the context of it, where it's coming from.
In Muslim community,
I mean, we
or
can speak both, I guess. It'd be interesting.
a
Again,
lot
it's
of
very
it,
generalized, so yeah.
yeah, proximity.
Hmm.
Proximity is one of, having the opportunity to be unfaithful,
Hmm.
um, can be a key factor. Um, I haven't seen a lot of infidelity amongst the Muslim community. I don't know if it becomes more accepted and people don't arrive at my door. I don't know if you've maybe seen, you might see more.
I do, and it's a
Yeah.
lot. It is the men. Um,
Yes.
a lot. I mean, two. I can think of two clients. One is they just haven't had sex in a while, um, and the other just that the intimacy's gone in the relationship, so they're seeking it out. And number two, it's a kind of suppressed man because of an authoritative mother, and that maybe is then replaced by a wife or something.
Right. So it's acting out resentment and revenge in a secret way.
Hmm.
It's helping his psychology, even though nobody knows, obviously. But yeah, that's pretty deep. Usually, if you remove sex from the relationship, you open up the possibility of infidelity.
Okay, that's
And that's
interesting.
what I say to couples. If you create a vacuum, something will fill it. And it isn't healthy to um, just deny somebody their need because you can't be bothered anymore. And so for the sex to be totally removed, you run the risk that, especially if they're still reasonably young people, you
Hmm.
run the risk that something like that might happen. The person with the lowest sexual desire has the sexual power in a relationship.
Hmm. Okay, it's interesting.
Yes, and that's a well-known fact. The person that wants the least sex has the sexual power in the relationship. And then when the sex gets removed completely, then a vacuum has been created that people, if the right circumstances come up, and again, we come to proximity, if they're in a place where they can meet somebody that could provide that need, will often take that chance. The few cases of infidelity that I've seen amongst the Muslim community, this was a while ago where the guy felt it was in his right because if he lived in Pakistan, he would have taken her as another wife anyway.
All right, okay.
He justified that.
Okay.
She was just a secret wife.
And your response to that? You just laughed.
I had to laugh at his justification, but I had to point out that he doesn't live in Pakistan. In the UK, you're not allowed a second wife, and actually, it was still cheating. I had to laugh at his attempts to justify his behavior.
Hmm. Okay. And maybe one shed some light when in the non-Muslim community, infidelity, so the general.
It happens. People are dissatisfied, they're unhappy with the relationship. They don't feel their needs are being met. They don't feel that they're given attention. Alcohol plays a big part
Mhm.
in a way that it won't do in
In the
the
Muslim community.
Muslim community. Nights out, work nights out,
Hmm.
Christmas parties, other events where a lot of alcohol is taken and people stray across the boundaries that they would normally maintain, can start off. But usually there is a hole somewhere in the relationship.
Okay. Yeah, there's
That,
already some context before. Hmm.
yeah, there is a need that's not being met within the relationship, whether it's sex, whether it's being seen, whether it's being valued and appreciated. There is often somewhere where the relationship has stopped meeting that need and people are seeking it elsewhere.
Hmm. Um, our final and third kind of broad segment and theme is how can couples communicate and revive intimacy? So we talked a wee bit at the start, the idea of kind of reviving and what that means like. So a couple of maybe questions around this, Pauline. So um, why do many couples struggle to talk openly about intimacy and how can they start a conversation around it?
I do think you have to develop, it's a skill that needs developing, and most of us never learn the skill. People can be married 30, 40 years and still find it hard to reveal something so personal. And I think that's the hard thing about it. It makes us very vulnerable revealing a sexual need at that level. There's a huge level of vulnerability required, and we need to feel sure that We can feel safe with our partners. They're not going to laugh at us or embarrass us or think that we're weird or and also it's not a topic that we're taught to speak openly about.
Mm.
Often with the work that I do, that's one of the key changes. Couples will say that they talk more about sex, they normalize talking about sex. The thing is when we choose to talk about sex, you do not talk about sex when you're lying naked in the bed next to each other. It's too vulnerable, too scary. You talk about sex in the daylight over the dining table with a cup of tea in your hand.
Mm.
We make the environment and the surroundings as safe and as comfortable as possible, not when we're at our most vulnerable. And that's when people choose to talk about it, usually in the bed, last thing at night, naked, and it's too scary. But it is a skill that I teach most of the clients that I work with. We will begin the conversations about sex in the consulting rooms so that they can then take that outside. And most people will say that they speak more openly about it
Mm.
after a few sessions. And we normalize the use of the words that we use to describe, like normalize the use of libido and the physical parts, so that we're staying in an adult arena. There's a
Mm.
lot of nudge, nudge, wink, wink around
Yeah.
sexuality in the culture, because of the embarrassment that the whole topic creates.
Um, for some couples, I've seen I use, intimacy cards and stuff like that. Do you think they're good for propping up conversations and, have a wee gig? It's almost you're giggling, but there's a half truth in it.
I think anything that helps have the conversation is useful. There are lots of intimacy cards, there's lots of exercises with the relationship therapists. There's a lot of stuff out there that helps these conversations. They're all helpful as a starting point, but the hope is that we don't need the props and we can learn to be comfortable and
Yeah.
open, honest with each other eventually. But because it's a skill, it's incremental.
Yes. It takes time to build. Yeah.
Yes, we build on it. We're not going to turn up overnight with the skills to discuss these intimate topics.
Mm.
And there are certain things that I wouldn't ask people to share in front of their partners because they are so deeply personal. So
Mm.
I wouldn't ask people to share their masturbatory life in front of their partners. I wouldn't ask people to share their sexual fantasies in front of their partners because these things reveal deeply personal things about us as individuals. And I think people have a right to that privacy. And if they wish to share with partners, fair enough. But I certainly would not ask that question of anybody in the consulting room.
Especially with Muslim couples where there's a lot of taboo to a lot of these things. There
Absolutely.
was there were
Absolutely.
there was one thing that I mean you probably know Esther Perel, who's quite big in this. I remember reading her book where she mentioned something like another exercise she gets to communicate with the couples is to open a separate email account just for this, in which they think of a scenario and they share it, and then the couple carries on. And I found that really actually interesting when it came to Muslim couples because stuff that was so taboo that couldn't be spoken from a very personal kind of view is projected upon this character of Alessandro, who's Italian, and he's doing this. And then the wives again has been projected on this, I don't know, Alicia. And then it's interesting in this arena of fantasy that they're projecting a lot, which they don't feel safe, comfortable actually to, like you said, to reveal to themselves. And then that,
That's lovely.
yeah,
That's a lovely way of playing safe. A separate email account. You're almost like another person,
yes.
an alter ego, and it's the alter ego that has that, and the relationship can still keep its safe boundaries. However, people do that. That sounds like a really lovely idea, and I admire a lot of her work and use a lot of her stuff. Um, it might be that people share books. There's a lot of books on sexual fantasies, Gillian Anderson has just produced one. I don't know if you know her.
Start from sex educate that
Yes, yes. Yeah, but her role as a
sex,
psychosexual
yeah,
therapist
yeah.
in sex education has expanded to the point where she produced a book on sexual fantasies.
Very interesting. I actually watched that, and and although from a Muslim point of view, there's a lot of kind of stuff that's not, but I watched it as homework for counseling, understanding those kind of dynamics. And you're right, she plays a role really well. So she's actually wrote a book then.
She's wrote a book on she collected women's sexual fantasies. And I believe that one of the fantasies in the book is hers, although it's been anonymized.
All right, interesting.
So she collected, and these pieces of work has been done in the past by someone called Nancy Friday, but she's almost kind of updated that. And some of my, I haven't tried it, admittedly, with a Muslim couple, but some of my other couples that I've suggested this book to have found it useful in terms of having that conversation
Hmm.
around sexual fantasies and projecting alter egos by reading the book together. And there's an audio version apparently that's very useful. Um, and sharing more information in that safe way.
Yes.
I
I
have
think when you screen it is very interesting. So the email and those scenarios, your partner could say, "Are you interested in that?" And depending on the mood and how you feel, say like, "No, no, no. That's just him. I was just blagging it." Or you could say, "You know what? I'm actually interested
yes,
in that."
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Depending on how safe you are and how far the conversation has gone in terms of allowing to open that up, we can reveal a bit more, or we can step back and say, no, 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 that's just a fantasy.
Hmm.
That's me projecting. But the key thing is to feel safe and comfortable enough to even open up the conversation. And I find these books useful in that you can just say, "Oh, that was really interesting," but like you say, you can say, "No, no, no, I'm just blagging it. I'm not. I really don't want to go there if you're not comfortable."
One question around this probably links back to infidelity and this. Often, what I get a lot is that if the husband's done something, if he's cheated, often he says, because my wife doesn't allow me to do it because she feels it's haram in our marriage. So, we spoke about anal sex, and it's haram. I just couldn't do it with her. So I mean, a few thoughts on that. What do you think about that kind of, and again, a justification you may laugh at, but what would you say around that? What's kind of the deep underlining thing here?
I think whether it's haram or not, if somebody just does not want to do that,
Okay.
they feel that that's outside their sexual comfort zone. I think we have to respect that.
Hmm.
I don't think anyone's sexual comfort zone should be pushed. So, for example, amongst the mainstream community, I might ask whether oral sex is a part of their practice. And if it's not, and people really don't want to go there, then I think they have the right to have that respected. You
Hmm.
know, whether, and if it is haram, then fair enough. But that isn't the point. If somebody
Yeah,
really doesn't want to do that,
you have to respect that.
I do think we should not expect partners to meet every mild kink and
Hmm.
every desire that might be outside what's termed vanilla sex. I think we have to be clear about that. That there are certain things that not every partner is going to want to meet.
Hmm. Okay.
And I do think that that's we just have to suck it out. I mean, does not having anal sex means it's not a life or death issue?
True. And then outside the Muslim, I mean, there'll be in the normal community, the wider community, just women don't want to do it. It's
There
just
will be lots of women that won't want to do that. Yes, there'll be lots of women that won't want to do that. And there'll be a lot of people that will be saying, actually, no, that's beyond my pale. That's where my line is drawn. And I think we have to respect people's lines rather than feeling that we have a right to whatever
Hmm.
our sexual preferences. And of course, if you've got religious constraints that make it haram, then that strengthens the line, doesn't it?
Boundary. Correct. That is correct. Um, Perhaps my final question before we get to the quick fire round. You speak generally a lot about psychosexual education. So, can you tell us what psychosexual education is, and then how does that help people navigate their intimacy challenges?
I think certainly in the UK, I don't know any other education system. Our school systems teach us about sexual reproduction.
Okay.
They don't teach us about human sexuality, how it functions, how it works, what are the difficulties, what are the issues, and the role that it plays in intimacy, relationships, and connection, the vulnerability of sexual activity and our sexual identities. We all have a sexual identity that is almost not given any air
Hmm.
or not given a sense of self about, because sex has become such a taboo subject. So often, this is what happens during adolescence. The sexual identity suddenly burgeons when puberty comes along and the
Yep.
hormones start raging and creating. And we can help support that sexual identity in a positive, healthy, sex positive way, or we can allow our children and they're emerging into young adults to feel a sense of shame about something that is the most natural thing we humans can do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So psychoeducation would involve creating a positive sense of sexual identity, an awareness of our sexual self, and how we look after that identity over the stages that human beings go through, over long-term relationships, over adolescence, over aging, because our sexual identities change as we get older, and keep it healthy and positive rather than a source of shame and distress and discomfort. Like we almost need to disown that part of ourselves.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. I remember you know the love language, you know the whole love languages quiz.
Yeah, yeah.
There was something similar, kind of your erotic blueprint. There was a quiz done around that. So you would do the quiz, it would find out if you're an energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, shapeshifter. And I think almost what you're saying is if you get to know about psychosexual education, you almost get to know yourself and your sex language, so to speak.
Yes, and normalize it as a
Yeah.
part of humanity. Before 1970 something, 71, when the first test tube baby, as they call them, set off the whole IVF industry. I think there was a film about it recently.
Mhm.
The only way to make a baby before 1971 was through sex. That was the only way you made babies. The IVF industry is very relatively new. Something so significant to our species and our humanity should be given a lot more respect than it is.
Hmm. Okay. Correct. Correct.
It creates us, it replicates us. There is nothing more wonderful and spiritually sound than that. But
Hmm.
yet, sex has got this difficult cloud around it that creates shame, embarrassment, and all the negative feelings that leads to things like vaginismus, where our sexual identity has almost had to be separated and disowned from us.
Hmm. And it's about embracing it, normalizing it, celebrating it in a way, in that
Oh,
wholesome, and for Muslims, it would be in that wholesome marriage where, we're allowed to celebrate and explore it further.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
we have some lovely examples of that, thank goodness. But there's also a lot of people struggling in distress,
That's true.
struggling with their sexuality that's become distorted. Porn usage distorts sexuality. Um,
Massively, yeah.
mhm. You know,
Um, mhm. um, we're at the quick fire round. I don't know if this quick fire because the questions are slightly longer. Um, so these are questions. We'll keep them slightly short, questions and answers. But it's really generally based on your practice and your experience of things, not like what's out there, but generally through the lens and through the eyes of Pauline Brown. That's how, we want you to kind of process these. So 5 questions. In your experience, what is the most common intimacy issue couples bring to therapy?
Loss of libido, lack of interest in sex.
Okay. Loss of libido. We kind
Mm,
of talked about that.
lack of interest. As I said, the libido is a use it or lose it
Yeah.
energy. If you don't pay it enough attention, it will dissipate and it will die.
Okay. What is one breakthrough moment you've seen in a couple struggling with sex?
Um, the first time penetration is achieved when the woman has
Oh,
vaginismus and the
wow.
couple
Okay.
has vaginismus. That is a moment of such great joy. That is a moment of such joy. I cannot tell you that even now, 30 years on, when that happens, and usually I get a text message,
It's happened. It's done.
and it's wonderful. And also the first pregnancy for a woman
Okay.
with vagina, that still brings me a great amount of joy because you know that without the really hard work that that couple has gone through, that child might not have been here.
Hmm. Okay. And it's for you, after so many years, it's still that kind of moment for you.
It's a magical moment. It
Hmm.
will always be magical. That moment will never become complacent. It's too special.
What's the biggest mistake people make when trying to fix their sex life?
Uh, Perhaps not talking enough, not enough communication with the partner.
Okay.
We're not, our sex lives are a shared experience, like much of our other
Hmm.
lives as well. Um, but because sex is so personal and is such an arena of vulnerability, we need to make sure that there's enough safe space within the relationship created to be able to communicate and have the conversation.
Hmm. What's the most important trait couples need to rebuild or sustain a healthy sexual connection? Important
Respect,
trait. Okay.
openness, respect and openness. To have really great sex, we need to feel safe. If we're feeling judged because we've put on weight because we've had a child, as a woman, if we're feeling judged because we're a man and we're worried about losing our erections and we're worried about what the partner's going to say if the erection fails, or something that you do see a lot in the Muslim male community, premature ejaculation.
Hmm.
If we're worried that the partner's going to condemn us because we've come too quickly, we will not have great sex because we will be in our heads, spectatoring, we call it, rather than in the physicality of the moment, enjoying the sensation.
Hmm. Okay.
A lot of spectatoring goes on in sexual dysfunctions, and that will always
Yeah.
mess up sex.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's us, Pauline. I would just really like to thank you for sharing all that, bringing the expertise, and I hope our viewers really kind of take on board. I mean, it's again, like you said, sex is one of the things not talked about. So everyone who's watching this, they'll have some issue within their sex life, and they'll be able to resonate. Any final thoughts? Maybe any final words before you want to kind of wrap up?
Just I think to stress the positivity of human sexuality, that it's a gift from God, to be cherished and, as you say, a blessing in a happy Muslim marriage. Not something to feel shameful and suppressed over. And we're taught too much suppression culturally. This is something that is natural and is a gift and is a wonder. And we should hopefully have a safe space to be able to celebrate that.
Okay, thank you. And finally, are you taking on clients?
I'm really busy at the moment.
Okay, so
I'm really full. I'm struggling to.
which is why I think on one of the papers you did say Scotland needs more sex therapists. Yes, we do. I mean, I did the RS diploma, so I'm a trained individual and psychotherapist and work with couples. And I know to become a psychosexual therapist, you need to do COSRAT, which is another 2.5 years or something, another intense diploma.
I don't think anyone's teaching the course in Scotland for
No,
some
no, it's
reason.
not as well in England now. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, Relationship Scotland used to run a course, they've stopped doing that. COSRAT run and various, the University of Lancaster runs a course, but most people are having to go down south to study.
Should
For some reason, there's no training courses in Scotland anymore. So it makes it a much more expensive course as
And
well.
maybe one, two things around it, because there's a lot of, I mean, another colleague of yours, Anne Chilton, who actually taught in our course, another incredible person. There's a lot of learning around anatomy and kind of the biology of it, as well as the more kind of psychotherapy and psychodynamic side of it, which is very interesting.
Yes, it's an important subject, and I think we're feeling the lack of levels enough of us in the country, and that those of us that are working are working really hard because there's just not enough, especially with backgrounds like yours that can bring an added dimension
But
to other communities.
so what you're saying, I should go ahead and
Well, I mean, it's something if you want to. I think we have to be certain that we have an interest in human sexuality and sex to work at the levels that we work with, and if you have that interest, then it might be worth exploring. But if you don't, and I meet a lot of counselors who don't, they just say, I couldn't do that work.
Hmm. I mean, I personally do. I often go to a lot of the COSRAT CPDs. So the two are coming up. One is female sexual difficulties and a few others. So I always go to the CPDs, and it really helps because it's a blind spot. And I do want to some point in the future to look at that. And although Pauline is very busy with clients, but we'll post her link to our website just in case if you want to reach out. But she is busy, and she's now juggling that with her NHS kind of chaplaincy work. Um, so yeah, so thank you, Pauline. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights to something which is quite an important part for Muslims and Muslim life, which is not often talked about in the public sphere. But as a counselor, I deal with this so much, so which is why I thought I'd bring you on to just to share a lot of light around this.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.